Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we added a few methods to our service and we are now going to use those methods from the service inside our new user component. So we already have this submit button here, and once the user clicks on submit, now I want to get or add a record to my Firebase database. So now inside my new user component, I've already hooked it up to my TypeScript classes submit method, where we were just logging the user form to the console. But now instead of that, I'll just call the user services, add a user to Firebase method, and I'm going to pass in the user forms value property. Let's save this, go back to the application, and let me just type in a few things in here like so, and a few more things. I'm going to specify mail as the gender, communication option as phone, and then click on I agree. Now let's click on submit and see what happens. So we get an error saying that permission is denied, and that should be legible because there are some rules that needs to be configured. um, the rules here says that if auth is not equal to null, then only I can read or I can write. But right now I'm not authorized enough to have the read or write permissions. But since this video series is not about authorization, I'm not going to have a look at that. We are simply going to change the rules here to true for both read and write. Now this is something that isn't really recommended for applications in production, because that way anybody would be able to read and write into your applications, and that's not really a desirable thing to do. So now let's just clear the console, and now let's go back to our database here. We still don't really have anything in here, but let's click on submit now, and we don't really see any errors. Let's go back to the database, and now I see a user's object inside which there is an object, this one. If I click on plus, then I should see all the details for a particular user here. If I click on company, I see the company details. If I click on address, I see the address details as well. Alright, so this is how you can um, add a particular record to your database. Let's quickly do something for read operation as well. I'm gonna collapse this div here. Let's create a div again in here. A div, the class is going to be call md7, and in here I'm simply going to inside a pre tag, I'm gonna print users and pass it via JSON pipe. Now I don't really have users right now, so I'll have to define some in this. So I already have a user list that I can use. I'll define a method named get users, and what this will do is it will call a method on the user service dot get users from Firebase. All right, now this is going to be returning a Angular Fire list. Now on Angular Fire list, there is like a method that we can use. So Angular Fire list exposes a method named Snapshot Changes. Uh, when we call this method, it returns an observable, and this observable essentially has the data snapshot for all the records inside a list in that collection. On each record, we have a payload and a key. This payload is going to have a to JSON method on it. When we call that method, we are going to get the JSON data for that particular list item. And then we have the key as well, which represents a unique identifier for a particular record. So like for this record here inside the users collection, this is going to be the key and this is going to be the value of it. So now let's go back to our code, and I'm going to call for let's let's just again check what is the method. Okay, so it's the get users from Firebase, on which we have method like snapshot changes, which if I call, then I can um, call a for each method on it, and in here I'll get a user snapshot like so. And inside this user snapshot, now let's create a user here, which is going to be user snap sorry, this is not going to be this dot user snapshot, it's just going to be user snapshot. I'll again have a for each method on it, and I'll get let's call this users snapshot, and this will return to us a user snapshot, inside which I will let's see what we get on the um, user snapshot. So we have a key and a payload. What are previous key and type? We aren't really concerned about that right now, so we'll just ignore them as of now. Let's create a user here, which is going to be equal to user snapshot dot payload. Now payload, on the payload we have a method named toJSON that can be called. So this is going to give us a user. We are also going to add a key on this. Okay, and since this is a weird name, we can use it like this so that we don't really get an error. And we are going to have a value of that using the key property here. Right now, inside this, let's use the user list here. So this dot user list, I'm going to set it to an empty array here, but once I get a user, then I'm going to call a push method on it, and I'm going to pass user as a user like so. What I'm doing here is I'm simply typecasting the user object into an iUser like so, and this will give me some users inside this user list. So now I can simply use it here like so, and I'll have to create a button to get the list of users. So I'm gonna create a button with the class of button and button primary, and this is going to call get users when I click on it like so. And the type of this button is going to be uh, button like so. Get users is the name of the method. Let's confirm that and paste it inside here. Let's save, go back to our app. Now initially we won't really be getting anything here. Let's click on get user here, and we get the user that we had here. Okay, we also get the key, and this key is exactly the same as the key that we see here, this one. Let's quickly create one more object here. So I'll just type in the details for this particular user: John Doe JD at domain.com. Let's type in the phone number as anything, website as anything, street as again anything. I'm just typing in rubbish values here and that's the least of our concerns right now. And let's select the gender and communication option. Right now we just have one object here. Now we'll see what happens when I click on submit. So if I click on submit, then if I go back to this list, I now see two objects, right? And that's the beauty of a real-time database, and that is that we didn't have to do anything out of the box. It essentially returns us all the updates that we have on this database here. We have also added one more object here inside the database, and that's the same object that is represented here when we get that, like so. We didn't really have to call a get user method again to get a hold of this updated data. It was updated automatically, and that is essentially because we are using the snapshot changes, which uh, returns to us an observable, and then we can just use this to get a hold of the data, right? So this was it regarding getting some data as well as adding it in real time and seeing the changes getting reflected here. In the next video, we are going to talk about update and delete. So I'll see you guys in there. Bye.